All right, welcome to this explainer. Today we're taking a hyper-focused look at the absolute foundation of cybersecurity, access control. For those of us living and breathing network architecture every day, it's super easy to just kind of look past the basics. But getting a rock-solid grasp on how digital permissions actually work beneath the surface, that's exactly what separates a pretty good security posture from a truly great one. So let's just strip away all the noise right now and look at the fundamental building blocks of system security. Okay, let's dive into this. Think about an action you perform, dozens, maybe hundreds of times a day. You move your mouse, you double-click a document, and boom, it opens, right? It feels totally instantaneous. But underneath that incredibly simple action lies an entire unseen world of rules, checks, and really complex security interactions. What actually happens in those microscopic milliseconds before a file opens? Well, it all boils down to two basic components. Every single interaction in access control comes down to this core dichotomy. On one side, we have subjects, which are totally characterized by their active nature. And on the flip side, we have objects, which are strictly passive. Think of this as the yin and yang of access control. Anytime an event occurs anywhere in a system, the roles are instantly split up. You've got an active requester and a passive target. Let's start with the active side. A subject is an active entity requesting access to a resource. Picture the subject as this needy, restless entity roaming around your network. It's constantly knocking on doors, constantly reaching out, constantly asking to interact with data. And hey, this isn't just limited to you, the human sitting at the keyboard. Sure, a subject can be a user, but actually it's just as often a background process or an entire system reaching out across a network. Basically, it is always the instigator. The object, by contrast, is entirely passive. It contains or receives information, and that's it. If the subject is the restless door knocker, the object is the dark room behind that door. It is wonderfully lazy. It literally just sits there, waiting to be accessed. It initiates absolutely nothing. But crucially, it holds all the value, whether that's just a single text file on your desktop or a massive, highly proprietary database. So the crucial point is how this maps directly onto your everyday actions. When you open a file, you, the user, actively clicking the mouse, are acting as the active subject demanding access. The file itself, that's the passive object. It was just hanging out on your hard drive, holding data, totally minding its own business until you demanded to interact with it. But humans definitely aren't the only active players in this game. Think about a routine automated task, like a nightly backup. You aren't doing anything at all, you're probably asleep. Instead, that background backup script wakes up and acts as the active subject, systematically requesting access to your data. Your files remain the passive objects receiving those requests. A few lines of code are acting with the exact same intent as a human user. Now, obviously, these active entities can't just run wild. They are governed by a really specific underlying attribute called a clearance. Assigned strictly to subjects, you can kind of think of a clearance as a digital VIP badge. Every single time a user or a backroom process tries to do something, the system checks this assigned clearance to determine exactly how much trust to extend to that instigator. On the flip side, those passive entities aren't just sitting there totally unprotected either. They have their own designated tags, called labels. A label is an attribute assigned strictly to objects. If the clearance is the VIP badge, while the label is the heavy padlock on the door. Every file, database, and passive container has a label dictating its sensitivity, and it spells out exactly what level of trust is required to interact with it. And this brilliantly illustrates the absolute foundation of access control. You've got clearances belonging to subjects on one side and labels belonging to objects on the exact opposite side. For any action to take place, for that file to actually open on your screen, these two sides have to evaluate each other. The system compares the subject's active clearance against the object's passive label. If the math checks out, access is granted. If it doesn't, the door stays shut. No way around it. Let's move to and see how this builds into our overall logic. To put it all together real quick, your nature dictates your attribute. If you're an active subject, like a user or a background process, you carry a clearance. If you're a passive object, like a file or a database, you're protected by a label. Truly internalizing this vocabulary allows you to instantly decode the mechanics of almost any security interaction out there. So, I want to leave you with a thought to apply to your own environment right now, today. We know a backup program acts as an active subject with a clearance, right? And we know that thousands of files it tries to copy are passive objects with labels. But do they actually match? How exactly is your specific system calculating that trust at a massive scale? Once you start viewing your digital world through this lens, you realize just how delicate those permissions really are